Hey friends, today we're going to be talking about climate and culture, and I just want to talk to you directly about this. My name is Eileen Fernandez Parker, and I'm from Cultivating the Learning. Um, for climate and culture, you might be hearing those words or that phrase being tossed around more and more. Maybe you don't know exactly what it means. Maybe you think they're interchangeable. Well, they're not. What is classroom climate? Well, I need you to think about classroom climate the same as weather on Earth. And I don't want to get into technical terms with all my science teachers, but basically, just like the weather, the classroom climate can change based on events like tornadoes and hurricanes. So the climate in your classroom changes too. Climate describes how people treat one another. And I need you to think about when a new student comes into your room. If he is a positive influence, he can have a positive effect on your classroom culture. During a full moon, think about how the climate in your classroom changes, right? Up north, we always knew when it was going to snow because of the positive ions in the air. There were extra ions, the kids got jumpy. All of that is a part of your classroom climate, okay? Now, your classroom culture, when you think about the culture of a country or a neighborhood, there are certain actions that are and are not acceptable, right? The clothes you wear, the words you use, the way you act. These are written and unwritten rules that create culture. The same is true in your classroom and your wider school. So the culture revolves around rules and norms. Sometimes there are rules about tardiness. The most effective cultural rules are spoken by the students in terms of group norms. So a bottom-up approach is the best. A top-down approach is not the best. With the rise of collaboration in business, there has been an increased need for group norms to improve productivity. I know that in some of my department meetings, we had to stop and return to or create group norms because some people were really not behaving in a way that was acceptable for a department meeting, and it was distracting for other people. It might be noisy, they might be having side chatter, they might be on their phone and not paying attention. So it's not just kids who need norms, right? Adults need norms, humans need norms. So it's not a negative thing, it just is. So now that we are increasing collaboration in the classroom, students are having the same experiences as adults in business. So because people come from different backgrounds and they act the way they know, group norms are important. So sometimes they just don't know any better, right? When people are oriented or have an orientation for a new job, a lot of the things that they're being taught are the company norms, right? This is how we do these things. This is how we address a customer. This is our culture, right? So your culture is more like your rules for how to behave and how to act in certain situations. The climate is something that changes, and the climate is, you know, kind of the temperature in the room. Are we all angry? Are we, why are we being short with one another? Or, different things like that. So the group norms are basically agreement for what is and is not acceptable under certain circumstances. So they can change depending on where you are and what you're doing. The members of the group or the class will discuss what they need to be able to work at peak performance. So this discussion that you're going to have with your kids is going to be about, what do you need to learn? And some kids will say, I need a quiet place. I can't concentrate with all that noise and all the talking. So we might be able to let those kids go out into the hall where it is quiet. And then some of the other kids who need to be talking about stuff and talking it out, they might need to be in the room. Or if it's the reverse, you might put the noisy kids out in the hall, right? Because you're just using the space that you have as best you can. So the members also discuss what they need to feel safe and to take risks. So it's not just about how I learn best, but I have to feel safe so that I can know that if I say something that seems out of the ordinary, people aren't going to treat me as if I'm dumb. or people aren't going to make negative comments or snide comments. So being safe in the classroom is super important, and that can be your culture and your climate, right? Because your culture tells me how to behave, but my climate is how I behave. So one is a rule, and the other is whether or not I'm fulfilling it. So some of your group norms will be about the emotional and psychological environment. It's not just about the physical environment in the room. So here's just to go a little bit deeper. If students do not feel safe to take risks, they will shut down or they will do the minimum. And if the classroom culture sets expectations that students agree upon, the teacher and the students can remind one another of those agreed upon rules and expectations. So it's a completely different environment when a teacher can say, all right, I need everybody to look at our group norms, and I need you to ask yourself if you're following the group norms. Did I call anybody out? Did I embarrass anybody or humiliate anybody? Did I make anybody feel small? No. And so now I'm creating a completely different climate in my classroom because it's not punitive, nobody's in trouble, they're just checking themselves, right? So that's one of the best things about having group norms. And you can call it a code of cooperation, you can call it a classroom vision, you can call it a social contract. They all set group norms, right? Some dig deeper, some will be more specific, but they all are there to do the same thing. All right, so how do climate and culture affect student agency? Well, for decades, if not centuries, teachers have posted their rules on the wall. I did it for years and years and years, right? I had my 5 rules, then I ended up making them 3 rules, and then it turned into 1 rule, and the 1 rule was we need to respect everyone and everything in the room. And I had an assistant principal who observed me. He said, Eileen, do you think that your classroom rule is a little bit vague? And I said, no, because we talked about it and it covers everything. So when I have to talk to kids, I just say, are you respecting everybody in the room? Are you respecting everything in the room? So it was really kind of simple. Today, I might break it down. I would be more specific and let the kids come up with that. What does being respectful look like? What does it sound like? Right? All those kinds of questions will help you to do that. So that was 30 years ago, right, that I started. And it was up until 10 years ago that I was in the classroom. So things have changed. The changes in portable technology, social media, have it your way personalized gadgets have changed how people learn and access and share information. Also, the ubiquity of social media and 24/7 streaming and reality shows, YouTubers, apps. Children are learning much more than we did at their impressionable ages. And we can't get into the discussion about what it's appropriate, how it's hurting them, all those different things. But we also can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And there's no sense in trying to turn it back, right? As I tell my teachers that I'm coaching after they get into a B session, and you all know what B stands for, I say to them, let's focus on what we can change and not what we can't. And I'll say to them, do we have any control over what's bothering you? And if they say no, then I move into, all right, let's focus on something that we have control over. So, and then we move into something positive that we're working on. So what we do have control over is how we run our rooms, right? We have the ability to hand over some of the power to the students. We can nurture them by allowing them to communicate with one another and respect one another's needs. And we can help them think about their own needs and thinking to determine what's the best path for them. So we've got that metacognition coming in too. So the whole idea about locus of control and whether or not students feel empowered to control their future, or they feel like it's some external force, whether the rules are unfair, the test was unfair, it's racial bias, whatever. And while all of those could be true, what we need to do is we need to help kids feel like they do have some control. And there's a lot to be said for kids who try, and never succeed. So, step one for us as teachers is to find those kids and to help them feel small success and then build upon it and build upon it. Because it's the success that helps kids feel like they do have some control because they can reflect on, well, what did I do that made me reach my goal? And now goals come into play too. So there are a lot of moving parts, and we're going to be talking about goal setting. We're going to be talking about group norms. We're going to be talking about helping kids feel successful. We're going to be talking about learned helplessness, right, and locus of control. And these are all things that you can share with kids. Let them use the terminology. Growth mindset, right? Do I have a growth mindset? Do I believe that I can make a change? Do I believe that things can change if I change my behaviors? Do I believe I can set a goal and break it down and reach it? So these are all the kinds of things that climate and control have something to do with, right? So student agency is about empowering students to be in the driver's seat. Before they get to drive, though, just like getting your license, they need to be the co-pilot. So they need to be up front, watching you do what you do, seeing what you do, getting comfortable in that space. Prior to that, though, they're in the back seat, right? They are just passengers. They just show up for the ride. They might be on their device looking down. They're not even seeing where are the streets? What should I be looking at? Well, what route is this? And so if we think about our classroom as the car and how we're always in the driver's seat, the kids in the back are not getting anything. The kids who are up front are at least starting to learn, right? And they could be on their device too, not learning. So it's important for us to engage them and say, okay, are you paying attention to this? Notice what I'm doing, all right? And that's where our metacognition comes in. So if your son or daughter were in a classroom, which would you prefer for him or her? Would you want a classroom where she or he has some choice and is actively engaged and empowered? Or would you prefer that they be in a classroom where she or he is merely a passenger or just along for the ride? So, something to think about. And as we move along, I'm going to be showing you some not just tips and tricks, but strategies for how to start applying this student agency in your classroom. Thank you.